A mother abandoned her 6 children for an overwhelming passion, but 20 years later they were shocked to discover what had happened to her. Donna Elena, a 60-year-old lady who lived alone in a small rented room, where her few belongings barely fit, had a simple atmosphere with old furniture worn over time, reflecting her precarious financial condition. The cracked walls and the creaking wooden floor gave the place an air of abandonment. Despite that, Donna Elena kept her space as clean as possible, a small attempt to maintain some dignity amid difficulties. Her livelihood came only from the meager pension she received, barely enough to pay the rent and buy her medicines. Donna Elena suffered from a serious health problem that required constant and expensive treatments, leaving her without money for any luxury or comfort. Every cent was counted and consumed by basic needs, leaving her on the brink of misery. "Donna Elena, here is some food that we got for you. I hope that helps you," said a neighbor, handing her some food. She thanked him with a weak smile, feeling a mixture of gratitude and shame. It was difficult to accept help, but her situation left her no choice. In addition to financial difficulties and loneliness, there was an even greater weight, guilt and remorse for her past choices. When she was young, Donna Elena succumbed to an overwhelming passion that led her to abandon her family. She was married and the mother of 6 children. The youngest was barely 4 years old at the time, but the intensity of her passion blinded her to the consequences of her actions, and she decided to leave everything behind in search of a life with another man. That decision left deep scars on her soul. Even after all those years, she was tormented by the sad and disappointed faces of her children, reminding her of the lives she had abandoned. The weight of guilt only increased with the passing of the years as she tried to find redemption. In a lonely life next to her lover, Elena thought, because you abandoned your own family, but she lowered her head, unable to face the true answer to those questions. The pain of guilt was unbearable, but she knew it was deserved. She remembered every moment of her departure, every look of despair in her children. The overwhelming passion that consumed her at that time seemed to eclipse any sense of responsibility or reason. Now, looking back, Donna Elena reflected on the decisions that had taken her there. They got there by confronting their conscience and searching for a form of redemption. For 20 long years, she lived by her lover's side, a period marked by ups and downs, but that somehow filled the void left by the family she had left behind. However, 5 years ago, his sudden and unexpected death left her completely alone, without children and family, only with her memories and regrets. Donna Elena now found herself as a lonely old woman surrounded by the cold and empty walls of her small rented room. Loneliness was her only company as she wondered if her choices had been the right ones. The weight of remorse drowned her because she knew there was no way to go back in time and undo what had been done. Each day was a battle against sadness and regret, a constant struggle to find peace and redemption within herself. One day, Donna Elena felt ill at home. She was at the window of her home and could hardly believe the intensity of the pain that took over her chest as she curled up in bed. From the rented room, a feeling of suffocation enveloped her, as if the weight of all her regrets was slowly crushing her. Tears ran down her face as she struggled to control her breathing. "Mrs. Elena, is everything okay?" asked a neighbor, worried upon noticing the agitation of the elderly woman. Donna Elena could barely answer, her voice suffocated by the affliction that dominated her. The world around her seemed to spin in slow motion as her consciousness dissolved into a sea of uncertainties and remorse. The pain in her chest suddenly increased to a lacerating agony that seemed to crush her completely. Dizziness dominated her, and everything around her began to darken. In a last effort, she tried to ask for help, but her words were lost in the void as her mind sank into darkness. In the hospital, Donna Elena was subjected to a series of tests while the doctors tried to determine the cause of her sudden fainting. While she waited, she found herself caught up in a whirlwind of confusing thoughts and memories, painful from a past she could not forget. It was then that, by chance, a familiar figure appeared before her eyes, clouded by tears. Valeria, a friend from her youth, was there having some tests done. The two women recognized each other instantly, as if time had not passed since the last time they saw each other. "Dear Donna Elena, how are you? What happened?" Donna Elena tried to articulate a response, but the words seemed to get lost amid the confusion and tiredness that consumed her. Valeria held her hand firmly, transmitting a feeling of comfort and security that Donna Elena had not felt for years. Donna Elena received medication and was discharged from the hospital. Valeria immediately perceived the difficult condition that Donna Elena was in and decided to act. With a determined look, she called a taxi, helped Donna Elena get into the car, and took her home. Together, they went to the small rented room that Donna Elena called home. Valeria watched with sadness and concern the situation in which her friend found herself. The small rented room seemed even more gloomy and desolate in the light of day, and Valeria felt a lump in her heart when she realized how precariously Elena lived. Donna Elena observed the expression of surprise and concern on Valeria's face, ashamed of exposing her miserable life to her friend. She never wanted anyone to see the state of abandonment she was in, but now, faced with the raw and naked reality, there was no way to hide the truth. "Valeria, I know it's not much, but it's all I can pay with my pension." "I'm so sorry you have to see this," said Donna Elena. "And your children? Do they know you're going through all this?" Valeria asked. "After I separated, I completely lost contact with my children. I never heard from them again. I never saw them again. I think they don't want anything to do with me anymore," Donna Elena replied. Valeria felt a lump in her chest at her friend's confession. She could never have imagined the pain and loneliness Elena had faced all these years without the support of her family. It was a distressing and unfair situation, and Valeria was determined to do everything she could to help Elena. "Dear, you don't deserve to live like this. I'm going to help you find your children. I'm sure they'll want to know what happened to you." "Valeria, would you do that for me?" Donna Elena asked. "Of course, dear. You are my friend, and I'm here to help you no matter what happens," Valeria assured her. Donna Elena lowered her gaze, fighting back the tears that threatened to overflow. "I don't know, Valeria. I don't know if it's the right thing, and if they don't want to see me, and if they are better off without me. Dear Elena, you are their mother. No matter what happened in the past, a mother's love is unconditional. They need to know that you are here, that you love them, and that you are willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild this relationship." "You are right, Valeria." Donna Valeria looked into Donna Elena's eyes with determination and said, "Elena, I will do everything I can to help you find your children. They need to know that you are here, that you love them, and that you are willing to rebuild this relationship." Donna Elena felt a mixture of gratitude and relief spread through her heart. Upon hearing Valeria's words, she never expected to receive such a generous offer of help, especially after so many years of loneliness and abandonment. It was as if a ray of light had pierced the dark clouds that loomed over her life, bringing with it the promise of a new beginning. "Valeria, I don't know how to thank you. You are a true friend." "I am by your side every step of the way," Valeria said. "Together we will overcome this and find the happiness that you deserve." With a farewell gesture, Valeria left Elena's house and headed to the old residence where Elena once lived with her children and her first husband. As she walked through the familiar streets, her mind was filled with memories of the past and expectations for the future. She was determined to do everything in her power to help Elena find the redemption and reconciliation she so deserved. After Donna Valeria left, Donna Elena began to think about her 6 children, Alejandro, the oldest and most sensible, who had always been a protector for his younger siblings, Sophia, with her unmatched kindness and compassion, who was the heart of the family, Carlos, the most jovial and outgoing, who always brought joy to the home; Diego, with his determination and strength, who was a true fighter; Lucia, with her sharp intelligence and indomitable courage, who had a free spirit that could not be tamed; and Mateo, the youngest, who had always been the most rebellious and stubborn but also the most affectionate when he wanted to be. It had been 20 years since she left them, but the love of a mother never disappeared. She wondered how they would be now, what they had become, and if they still thought of her. She missed the hugs, the laughter, the fights, and even the shared tears. They were her children, her blood, her flesh, and nothing in the world could change that. With a sigh, Donna Elena closed her eyes and let the memories envelop her like a gentle breeze. She could feel their presence around her like ghosts of the past that had never abandoned her. Despite the distance and the time, the love she felt for each one of them was eternal and unbreakable. She prayed every night for them to be well, to find the happiness they so deserved, even if she was not there to see it. Amid her thoughts and longings, Donna Elena found solace in the certainty that, although separated, they would always be united by the unbreakable bond of a mother's love. She promised herself that one day, somehow, she would find a way to reunite with her children and rebuild the ties that time had worn. With a sad smile on her lips and her heart heavy with longing, Donna Elena immersed herself in her memories, feeding the flame of hope that burned within her. While the world outside continued its relentless course, she remained there in her little world of memories, saving every precious moment she shared with her children until the day they could meet again. Meanwhile, Donna Valeria walked through the familiar streets of Donna Elena's old neighborhood. Her eyes searched for familiarity among the buildings worn by time. She knew that finding Elena's children would not be easy, but she was determined to do everything in her power to help her friend in need. It was then that she saw a tall, thin man with familiar features that immediately made her recognize him as Alejandro, Elena's eldest son. "Alejandro," Valeria called, approaching cautiously. Alejandro turned slowly, surprised to see an unknown woman addressing him with an expression of urgency. "Yes, it's me. Can I help with something? I'm a friend of your mother, Elena. I need to talk to you about her. I haven't seen her for 20 years. What happened to her?" Alejandro asked. "Your mother is going through difficult times. She is sick and living alone in precarious conditions. She needs help." Alejandro absorbed Valeria's words, his heart tightening with the disturbing news about his mother. Despite the wounds of the past, he still loved her and cared for her. He knew he couldn't just ignore Valeria's call, not when it came to the health and well-being of his mother. "Where is she? Give me the address. I will go see her immediately." Valeria felt a mixture of relief and gratitude seeing Alejandro's willingness to help his mother. She gave him Elena's address, knowing that now, with the help of her eldest son, Donna Elena would finally receive the support and care she so desperately needed. Alejandro walked through the streets with his heart tight from the news he had received about his mother. He tried to process the mix of emotions that dominated him: pain, worry, and nostalgia. Upon arriving at the address provided by Valeria, he felt a lump form in his throat. He hesitated for a moment before knocking on the door, his heart beating uncontrollably in his chest. The sound of knocking echoed through the small hallway, and seconds later, the door slowly opened. Alejandro held his breath as his eyes met his mother's tired eyes. For an instant, neither of them said a word. They just looked at each other, letting the magnitude of the moment settle upon them. Then, without warning, they threw themselves into each other's arms, hugging tightly as if they feared the moment might slip through their fingers. Tears burned in Alejandro's eyes as he felt the warm and comforting embrace of his mother. "My son, how handsome you are. I am so happy that you are here with me." "Mom, I am happy to see you too," he replied, his voice breaking with emotion. Alejandro smiled through his tears, feeling a wave of love and relief flood his heart. "Mom, I have missed you so much." "I missed you, son." Every day she confessed, her voice heavy with the weight of years of loneliness and regret. Tears ran freely down her wrinkled cheeks. The two of them stayed there, sharing their emotions. It was a moment of healing, a moment of forgiveness, a moment of love. "My son, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I left, not having the courage to face the pain I caused you. I know my actions were selfish. Mom, I accept your apologies. I know you're not perfect, just like the rest of us. What is important is that we are here now, together, and we can start again. I love you, Mom. I have always loved you, and I will always love you. Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you for forgiving me, and for being here for me. I promise that I will do everything possible to deserve your trust again, to be the mother that you and your brothers deserve," she declared, her eyes shining with determination and hope. And so, mother and son shared a moment of forgiveness and reconciliation, leaving behind the wounds of the past and embracing the present with gratitude and love. Alejandro bought some groceries for his mother and said he would talk to his brothers about her. She thanked him, and he said goodbye with a warm hug and a kiss on the forehead from his mother. That sunny afternoon, Alejandro sat at the table of the modest dining room, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Since he was the oldest brother, currently 40 years old, he had called all his brothers for a family meeting. Around him were Sophia, aged 38, whose kind eyes reflected a mixture of hope and apprehension, Carlos, 35 years old, with his firm and determined posture that revealed his concern for the well-being of the family, Diego, the 30-year-old brother, whose loaded expression evidenced the emotional scars of the past, Lucia, 26 years old, whose look was a mixture of distrust and curiosity, and Mateo, the youngest, 24 years old, whose rebellious and reserved attitude hid a heart full of conflicting emotions. While the brothers sat around the table, Alejandro felt a lump form in his throat. He knew that this meeting would be the first step toward reconciliation and forgiveness, but he also knew it wouldn't be easy. Taking a deep breath, he began to speak, his words full of determination and brotherly love. "Brothers, I know the past has been difficult for all of us, but today I am here to try to leave the wounds behind and build a future together," Alejandro began, his voice firm but full of emotion. The curious glances of the brothers turned to him, waiting for the revelation that was about to come. With a lump in his throat, Alejandro continued, carefully choosing his words to convey the seriousness of the situation. "Our mother, Mrs. Elena, is going through difficulties. She lives alone, sick, and with limited resources. I found her recently," he faltered for a moment before gathering the courage to continue. "She needs us, brothers. We need to be by her side, even if it is difficult." A tense silence settled in the room, each of the brothers absorbing the news with a mixture of surprise and concern. Sophia let out a heavy sigh, her eyes full of unshed tears. Carlos frowned, his face serious as he considered what to do next. Diego remained silent, but his eyes expressed the pain he felt for his mother. Lucia crossed her arms, a distrustful expression on her face as she processed the revelation. Mateo, the youngest, looked at Alejandro with a mixture of disbelief and determination. "And what do you suggest we do, Alejandro?" Sophia finally broke the silence, her voice trembling with contained emotion. Alejandro looked at each of his brothers. "I understand the weight of responsibility on your shoulders. I suggest we unite as a family and go for her. She needs us now more than ever." Carlos nodded slowly, his serious expression revealing the seriousness with which he faced the situation. He looked at his brothers with determination, ready to face the challenges that were to come. "I agree. Our mother needs us. She made mistakes in the past, but she is our mother," he declared with a firm and determined voice. Sophia nodded in agreement. You are right. No matter what happened in the past, our mother needs us now. I am with you, she affirmed, her voice filled with emotion. Diego crossed his arms, hardened by the pain and resentment he had carried for so long. I do not agree with this. Our mother abandoned us 20 years ago, and now she wants help as if nothing had happened. Let her manage on her own, he declared, his voice full of bitterness. Lucia nodded in agreement, her eyes sparkling with contained anger. He's right. Why should we help her? After all, she doesn't deserve our compassion, she stated, her voice cold and cutting. Mateo, the youngest of the brothers, remained silent for a moment, his somber expression reflecting the pain and confusion he felt inside. Finally, he spoke with a voice full of resentment. They are only drying the tears of a woman who abandoned us. I refuse to be a part of this, he said, his voice trembling with repressed emotion. The discussion in the room reached a point of conflict. The 6 siblings firmly positioned themselves on opposite sides of the argument. Alejandro, Sofia, and Carlos expressed their determination to help their mother, while Diego, Lucia, and Mateo remained intransigent in their decision not to get involved. Alejandro looked at Mateo with a mixture of frustration and disbelief, his eyes searching for some vestige of understanding in the younger brother. How can you be so insensitive? She is our mother. Mateo lifted his chin, stubbornly, his words full of defiance. And she took it from us too. Everyone is blinded by guilt and remorse, but I refuse to be part of this, he replied with a hard and inflexible tone. The tension in the room was palpable. The older and younger brothers looked at each other with eyes full of resentment and disappointment. The words flew from one side to the other, each defending their position with fervor and determination. Finally, the discussion reached its climax, with the younger siblings choosing to leave the meeting, leaving behind a heavy climate of misunderstanding and sadness. Alejandro, Sofia, and Carlos looked regretfully towards the closed door, knowing that the road ahead would be difficult but determined to face it together as a united family. Sofia looked at her older brothers with determination in her eyes. Although the tension of the conflict still weighed on them, she said, I think we should go visit her. No matter what happened in the past, she is still our mother. Carlos nodded in agreement with his sister. I think so too. We need to put aside our resentment and be there for her in this difficult time. Alejandro looked at his brothers with gratitude, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. We are all in this together. Let's go and show our mother that we still care despite everything. With their minds determined and their hearts heavy, the 3 older brothers set off toward their mother's house, guided by the love they still felt for her despite the scars of the past. Together, they would face the unknown, united by the hope of reconciliation and the promise of a new beginning. When they knocked on the door of Dona Elena's house, Alejandro, Sofia, and Carlos felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. When the door opened and they found the excited face of their mother, tears running down her cheeks, their hearts were filled with an overwhelming mix of emotions. Dona Elena seemed unable to believe what she was seeing, her eyes opened wide in a mixture of surprise and joy. Mom, murmured Sofia, her voice choked with emotion as she ran to hug her. Carlos followed her, wrapping his mother in a strong hug, unable to hold back his tears. The silence in the room was filled with the sound of the brothers' muffled crying, a reflection of the whirlwind of feelings that invaded them at that long-awaited moment. Alejandro joined the hug. Mrs. Elena could not find words to express her gratitude and joy. She held her children as if she feared they would disappear at any moment, her arms tightening around them as if she wanted to never let them go. She finally pulled away enough to look each of them in the eyes, her heart overflowing with love and gratitude. My children, you came, she finally managed to say, her voice choked with emotion. The 3 siblings exchanged shaky smiles. In that moment, The past seemed to dissipate, replaced by the promise of a future full of love and togetherness. They knew there was a lot of work to do, and many difficult conversations to have, but they were determined to face it all together as a united family once again. "Mom, we miss you so much," Sophia began, her voice choked by the emotion contained for years. "Despite everything that happened, we never stopped loving you." Mrs. Elena nodded, unable to contain the tears that continued to flow from her eyes. "I know I was wrong, my dear ones. And I am so sorry for all the pain I caused you," she said sincerely, her words loaded with regret. Carlos put his hand on his mother's, offering silent comfort. "We understand, Mom. We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we are here now, together, and we are going to take care of you the best we can," he said tenderly. Donna Elena smiled, grateful for her children's forgiveness and for starting over. "I couldn't ask for better children," she murmured with her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you, my loves, for being here for me." Sophia and Carlos exchanged a look full of understanding, reaffirming their commitment to be by their mother's side no matter what the future held for them. The days that followed the reconciliation between Mrs. Elena and her children were filled with intense activity. Alejandro, Sophia, and Carlos dedicated themselves to caring for their mother with all the love and dedication they could muster. They took Mrs. Elena to the doctor, making sure she received the necessary medical attention to treat her weakened health. They bought the prescribed medications and made sure she took them as directed, making sure she did not lack anything for her well-being. They went to the supermarket and bought healthy and nutritious food, ensuring that their mother had an adequate diet. They also acquired items for the home, such as new bedding, household items, and even some furniture, providing a more comfortable and welcoming environment for her. The house underwent a real transformation, becoming a more pleasant place for Mrs. Elena to live. In addition, the three brothers joined together to resolve pending issues, such as overdue rents. They paid off the accumulated debts, ensuring that their mother would no longer have to worry about housing. Hiring a caregiver was also an important decision, ensuring that Mrs. Elena received the necessary support in her daily activities, mainly because she was still recovering from health problems. "I want to thank you for everything you have done for me," said Mrs. Elena, her voice breaking with emotion as she looked at Alejandro, Sophia, and Carlos with gratitude in her eyes. Alejandro answered, holding her hand lovingly. Sophia and Carlos nodded, expressing their support silently. They knew that their actions could not erase the past, but they hoped to bring some comfort and relief to the present. "They are the best children a mother could ask for," continued Donna Elena, a trembling smile emerging on her lips. "I know I made mistakes in the past, but having them by my side now is the best gift Alejandro could receive." Sophia and Carlos approached to hug their mother, wrapping her in a warm and comforting embrace. Words alone could not express their love, their sincere gestures of affection and care spoke volumes. "We love you, Mom," said Sophia with tears in her eyes. "And we will always be here for you, no matter what happens." Donna Elena felt her heart overflow with gratitude and love. She knew that, regardless of the challenges they still faced, they were together. With all that care and attention, Donna Elena began to show signs of improvement. Her health gradually improved, her spirits increased, and she felt happier and more grateful than ever. The constant presence and support of her children made all the difference in her recovery. She felt blessed to have such loving and dedicated children. However, there was something that worried Mrs. Elena. She could not stop thinking about her other three children, Diego, Lucia, and Mateo. Their absence weighed on her heart, leaving a void that she wanted to fill in many lonely moments. Mrs. Elena wondered why the other three children had not taken the same step as Alejandro. Sophia and Carlos had a deep desire to reconnect with them, heal the wounds of the past, and move forward as a united family. However, Donna Elena also understood that each person had their own time and their reasons. She reflected on the unique experiences of each of her children and how those experiences could have influenced their choices. Perhaps, she considered, Diego, Lucia, and Mateo were dealing with their pains and wounds and needed more time to overcome the past inside themselves. Donna Elena harbored the hope that one day her children would be together again. She longed for the day when her children could find in their hearts the forgiveness and compassion necessary to reconcile. She hoped for the day when she could hug them again, share with them her joys and sorrows, and build new memories together. Even in the uncertainty of the future, she kept the flame of hope alive, believing that a mother's love was capable of overcoming any obstacle. One day, Mrs. Elena asked Alejandro and Mateo a question. "How are you?" Her voice was full of anxiety and maternal love. Alejandro hesitated for a moment, his thoughts seeming distant as he searched for the right words. "It's okay, Mom," he finally answered, trying to maintain an optimistic tone. However, no matter how hard he tried to reassure her, there was a noticeable tension in her expression, a weight that she silently carried in her heart. Donna Elena noticed the doubt in her son, even though he tried to hide it. She knew Alejandro well enough to sense when something worried him. "Is there something else, my son?" she asked softly. Alejandro's concern increased as he thought carefully before answering, knowing that he couldn't hide the truth from his mother. "Mateo is facing some challenges, Mom," he admitted, choosing his words carefully so as not to worry her even more. "But he is handling it in his way." Alejandro didn't want to tell her that his younger brother had refused to help their mother during the family reunion. He didn't want to hurt her. Then, Alejandro decided to change the subject. "Mom wanted to talk to you about something important." "Of course, son." "What's wrong?" replied Mrs. Elena, worried about the serious expression of her eldest son. "My daughter Marta will be 15 next month. I was thinking of giving her a special party and I would love for you to be with us," Alejandro explained with a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Mrs. Elena was silent for a moment, letting Alejandro's words resonate in her mind. She was transported to the past, remembering the happy moments with her children on special occasions. Although time had passed, the idea of attending her granddaughter's 15th birthday party touched her deeply. "It would make me very happy to be present at Marta's party," she replied with tears of emotion in her eyes. The smile that formed on Alejandro's lips was enough to light up Donna Elena's face. She felt grateful for the opportunity to be with her family at such a significant moment. The long-awaited day of Marta's 15th birthday party had finally arrived. The hall was decorated with splendor, full of vibrant colors and twinkling lights. Friends and family gathered to celebrate this special moment in the life of the young Marta. Alejandro was radiant next to his daughter, while Marta showed a bright smile, eager to share that day with her loved ones. Among the guests was Mrs. Elena, Marta's grandmother, who was anxiously waiting for the moment to meet her granddaughter. "This is Marta, my daughter." "Marta, this is your grandmother, Mrs. Elena," said Alejandro, introducing Marta with a smile. Warmly, Marta looked at Mrs. Elena with a sparkle in her eyes, instantly feeling like she was with the grandmother she had only known through stories. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Grandma," said Marta, extending her hand to greet her. Mrs. Elena smiled kindly at Marta, looking at her tenderly. "You are very pretty, Marta. Your father is a lucky man to have such a charming daughter," she praised sincerely. Marta blushed slightly at the compliment, feeling flattered by her grandmother's kindness. "Thank you, Grandma. It means a lot to me to hear that from you," she replied with a shy smile, excited by the warm welcome from Mrs. Elena. While Mrs. Elena enjoyed the moment next to Marta and her son Alejandro, the joyful atmosphere of the party seemed to suddenly change. Her gaze turned to the distance, where she saw her three youngest children, Diego, Lucia, and Mateo. A feeling of apprehension invaded her when she saw them there in the same environment. After so much time apart, her heart beat faster as she watched them from afar. Trying to decipher their expressions and feelings, Mrs. Elena felt a whirlwind of emotions as she looked at them, deeply wishing to be able to approach them and talk to them. At the same time, she feared the reaction she might receive. Between smiles and hugs, she tried to hide her apprehension, but the presence of her children there awakened painful memories and uncertainties about the future. What would they be thinking? How would they react when they saw her? After so much time, these questions resonated in her mind as she looked at them. She struggled to maintain her composure in front of Marta and the other family members at Marta's party. The celebratory atmosphere filled the air with laughter, music, and dancing. Alejandro watched the guests having fun, but his attention was directed to the three younger siblings, Diego, Lucia, and Mateo, who were gathered at a table, distant and reserved. Determined to try to promote family reconciliation, Alejandro walked towards them, crossing the room decorated with colored lights and flowers until he reached the table where they were sitting. "Diego, Lucia, Mateo, why don't you go see our mother? She would be happy to see you here," suggested Alejandro, approaching the table where the three siblings were sitting together. "No, Alejandro. We don't want to have contact with her." "You know that," answered Diego with a serious and firm expression, avoiding the gaze of his older brother. Lucia, at his side, nodded, agreeing with Diego's words. "It's better this way. We don't want to open old wounds," she added. Mateo remained silent for a moment, seeming to reflect on the situation. "I agree with them. I see no reason to pretend something that does not exist," Mateo said. Alejandro, understanding his siblings' position but still feeling a pang of sadness for the division in the family, replied, "Okay, I understand. But remember that she is our mother, and a gesture of compassion costs nothing." Diego and Lucia exchanged a significant look while Mateo looked away, uncomfortable with the conversation. The end of Marta's 15th birthday party marked the moment when only the family remained, wrapped in a tense silence. The guests had already left, leaving behind an atmosphere charged with unresolved emotions. It was the perfect opportunity for Mrs. Elena's three youngest children, Diego, Lucia, and Mateo, to confront their mother. They directed glances full of resentment towards her and began to express their feelings. "Mom, I can't believe you showed up here today," Diego said, crossing his arms and looking at his mother with eyes full of disappointment. Mrs. Elena swallowed, feeling her heart tighten at her son's words. "I just wanted to be here with you to see my granddaughter, Marta." "But, Mom, you know you don't deserve to be here," Lucia spoke with tears in her eyes that reflected the pain she had carried for years. "You abandoned us when we were children. How can you expect us to be okay with that?" Mateo spoke next. "Mom, I don't know if I will ever be able to forgive you for leaving us like that. You left us alone, and that marked us forever." Donna Elena felt a lump form in her throat. The words of her children hit her like sharp daggers. She desperately wished she could go back in time to correct the mistakes of the past, but she knew she couldn't. The guilt weighed on her shoulders like an unbearable burden that she had carried for years. "I know I was wrong. I regret every day having left that way." Tears began to run down Mrs. Elena's face as she struggled to find the right words. "But please, give me a chance to redeem myself, to be a better mother now." Alejandro took the floor. "Let's calm down. Our mother is old and has health problems. She made mistakes in the past, but we need to understand that that does not erase the fact that she is our mother. Let's think about it." "There is nothing to think about," said Diego. Mateo's voice was full of bitterness. "She abandoned us when we were children, and now, after all these years, she expects us to forget everything and pretend that everything is fine." Mrs. Elena felt her heart break hearing the sharp words of her youngest son. I know I was wrong, but do you know what you did to us, Matteo? She asked. Matteo interrupted, his expression hardened by resentment. You have no idea what it was like to grow up without a mother, how we had to manage things on our own after you left us. Lucia nodded, her wet eyes reflecting the pain she had carried since childhood. Matteo is right, Mom. You abandoned us when we needed you the most. And now, after all these years, you expect us to forget everything and pretend that everything is fine. Diego remained silent, but his gaze expressed a mixture of sadness and indignation. He knew that the words of his brothers were harsh, but he couldn't deny the validity of their feelings. I need to reveal something about your father. Donna Elena broke the tense silence that floated over the room. Her voice trembled, revealing the seriousness of her words. All eyes turned to her, anxiously awaiting what would come next. She felt a lump in her throat, but knew she had to be honest with her children, even if it meant facing the consequences. Diego, Lucia, and Matteo exchanged nervous glances with each other, without knowing exactly what to expect. Their expressions reflected a mix of curiosity and apprehension as they awaited the revelation their mother was about to make. After our separation, Don Pedro finished raising the children alone. Donna Elena continued, her voice trembling. She never remarried. She had died 2 years ago. All the brothers exchanged perplexed glances, anxious to know what Donna Helena was going to say after their separation. I tried to keep in touch with you, she began with emotion, but what you didn't know was that your father would kill me. He said that if I tried to see you or contact you in any way, he would kill me. Diego, Lucia, and Matteo exchanged worried glances, absorbing their mother's words. The revelations explained many of the absences and the failed attempts at communication over the years, but they also brought to light a new layer of pain and understanding. I was afraid, my children, Elena continued, her voice trembling. Afraid of losing you, afraid of what he might do. I was alone, without support, and I didn't know where to turn. Elena's words echoed in the room, filling the space with an atmosphere charged with emotion. She looked at her children, hoping they would understand the seriousness of the situation and the depth of her love for them. Besides, there is something else, continued Mrs. Elena, reflecting on her thoughts before she began to narrate. Many years ago, after the separation, I decided to try to talk to his priest, speaking to him with words full of regret. I wanted to maintain some kind of contact, especially with the 3 youngest, but when I went to his work, he reacted in a way I never imagined. Diego, Lucia, and Matteo listened attentively, capturing every word of their mother as she shared that dark part of her past. He was furious, continued Elena, the lump in her throat evident. He called me a traitor, destroyer of families. I begged her to let me see them so I could stay with the 3 youngest, but she refused. Elena's words hung in the air, charged with palpable tension. Her children absorbed every detail, feeling the weight of the threats and hostility she had faced. She said horrible things. She swore that if I tried to get close to you again, she would not hesitate to take my life, and then yours. Diego, Lucia, and Matteo felt a shiver run down their spines. As they listened to their mother's revelations, the realization of the magnitude of her suffering left them stunned and furious with their absent father. I couldn't risk my children, Elena said, her eyes filled with tears. I was afraid, and every time I thought of you, the fear only increased. I just wanted to protect you, even if it meant walking away. She explained, tears beginning to run down her cheeks. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry about that, but I've always loved you, and I never stopped thinking about you. Diego, Lucia, and Matteo exchanged glances, processing their mother's shocking words. A tense silence loomed over the room, interrupted only by the slight trembling in Matteo's hands as he tried to absorb the revelation. I didn't know that, Diego admitted. His expression reflected surprise and confusion. I never imagined he could do something like that. Lucia, for her part, bit her lower lip with clouded thoughts as she tried to reconcile the image she had of her father with the shocking revelations from his mother. "This is hard to believe," she murmured, her voice breaking with emotion. Matteo remained silent, lost in his thoughts, trying to process the magnitude of what he had just heard. His mother's words echoed in his mind, leaving him with an uncomfortable and disturbing feeling. "It's a lot to process," Matteo finally spoke, his voice sounding hoarse and tense. "We never knew how you were able to deal with all this alone, Mom." Matteo's question hung in the air, full of admiration and respect. The three brothers shared a common feeling of bewilderment at their mother's revelations and a deep respect for her strength and courage in the face of such adversity. "I don't know, my children," Elena replied, her voice breaking with tears. "I only did what I thought was best at that moment, even if that meant hiding the truth from you." Diego, Lucia, and Matteo exchanged remorseful glances, acknowledging the pain their mother had endured in silence for so long. "We're sorry, Mom," Diego said with a voice full of regret. "We're sorry for not knowing that our father had done that. He spoke badly of you, but he never mentioned that he had threatened you." "I'm sorry, Mom," added Lucia, with eyes full of tears. "We didn't know. We didn't understand." Matteo, with a serious expression, said, "We are here for you now, Mom. We will always be." His feelings of guilt mixed with a genuine desire to do the right thing. Elena looked at her children with love and gratitude and said, "I forgive you, my dear ones. The important thing is that we are together now. Let's move forward together as a family." The four embraced each other, sharing a moment of reconciliation and renewing the ties that united them despite the adversities faced in the past. There was hope on the horizon, a promise of brighter days, and a family more united than ever. Alejandro, Sofia, and Carlos approached in silence, observing the emotional moment between their mother and their younger siblings. They felt a strong impulse to join the embrace, to express their love and support to the mother who had suffered so much. With bright smiles and bright eyes, tearful children joined the group, surrounding Elena and her siblings in a warm and comforting embrace. No words were needed, the warm embrace spoke volumes about the love and reconciliation that permeated that moment. Elena felt her heart overflow with gratitude to have all of her children together, sharing forgiveness and love for one another. It was a moment of healing and renewal, a new beginning for her family where the painful past could finally be left behind. As the embrace continued, Elena felt a sense of peace and fullness that she had not experienced in a long time. The loving presence of her children around her was the best gift she could receive, proof of the power of forgiveness and the strength of family love. "And, Mom," Alejandro said with a warm smile, "we want to start over. We want to forget the past and forge new memories and experiences with you." Sofia nodded firmly. "We are here to build a better future together, Mom. The love we share is stronger than any obstacle, and I am willing to leave the past behind to create new memories by your side." Carlos, with a determined look, added, "Mom, I want to be an excellent son and create happy moments by your side." Diego, who kept a serious face, spoke with sincerity. "Mom, I know I said things that hurt you. I deeply regret it, but I am willing to do everything necessary to rebuild our relationship and make new memories together." Lucia, with teary eyes, took her mother's hand with affection. "Mom, I am ready to leave the past behind and walk by your side, building a future full of happiness and union." Finally, Matteo, the youngest, expressed his determination firmly. "Mom, I know I was hard on you in the past, but I am willing to change. I want to create new memories and experiences by your side, leaving all the sorrows behind." Elena felt her heart overflow with emotion at the words of her children. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, allowing her to breathe more freely. she took their hands lovingly, looking at each of them with gratitude. "My dear ones," she began, with the weight of decades of pain and regret, "nothing makes me happier than hearing these words from you. I am ready to start over, to leave behind the sorrows of the past, and embrace the present with all the love I have in my heart." Elena hugged her children tenderly, feeling blessed to have them by her side. "You are my greatest gift. The love we share is stronger than any pain of the past. We will face the future together with courage, passion, and unconditional love." In the heat of that moment, the family hugged each other tighter, celebrating not only a new beginning but also the transformative power of forgiveness, love, and union. They were ready to face the future side by side, with courage and determination, and with forgiveness in their hearts and family ties restored. Elena and her children lived a moment of peace and happiness, celebrating the power of love and redemption after so many years of separation and resentment. That moment represented the healing of old wounds and the rebirth of a lost bond. Each hug, each word of forgiveness, was like a balm for their souls, rebuilding trust and strengthening family ties. For Elena, it was a moment of deep gratitude and relief. She felt blessed to have a second chance to be with her children, to share precious moments with them, and to create new memories. The children, in turn, were also excited and relieved. The pain and resentment they had carried for so long were dissipating, giving way to a renewed love for their mother. In that moment of celebration and reconciliation, they all understood that forgiveness was the key to true love and happiness. Together, they were determined to build a bright future based on love, respect, and mutual understanding. And so, with their hearts united by indissoluble bonds, Elena's family embarked on a new journey, ready to face together any challenge that might arise. Fate has a way for them. If you like this story, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue sharing wonderful stories like this one. Now a new story will appear on your screen. We are very happy to have you here with us. A hug and until the next video.